Yeah.
It is.
Huh. Huh? You're live.
All right, good to be with you all tonight. For any who are joining us on our live post, I believe will also be available on the website later. I'm going to walk through our prayer list tonight and give you a few updates before we hear from Gary tonight. Dr. Furr has a Bible study tonight to bring us. It's good to be with you in a little different way on Wednesday nights. Of course, we're continuing to add different elements to the program. And I'll give you a couple of announcements in advance of the prayer list. Remember, we have 2 more weeks of Vesper services. They'll be this Sunday, this coming Sunday evening, and the following. Both of those are happening in the amphitheater. And then this is the beginning of our Wednesday night sessions, so you can join us in person on Wednesday nights by reservation, or if you prefer, you can watch the stream. Remember also that October 25th, we'll have our first in-person sanctuary worship. And you'll be able to register for that worship service the Monday prior. So the week in advance of the worship services, you'll be able to reserve a space. And so we look forward to that and seeing more and more of you face to face, often across in a mask sense, but regardless, just being together is a gift. You may have located your prayer list on the website. Remember, that's available to you. You can go to our website and you have that code that you use to look anytime at our updated prayer list. And we do have a few folks who are on who weren't on last week. Brian LeBold is in line for a hip surgery coming up. It's the 7th. I've lost track of days. The 7th today. Today is the day. Brian's having surgery today, and so we'll get an update and hope for great results on that. We also have Mindy Bodenhammer, who has an upcoming surgery in a couple of weeks, a foot surgery that will leave her in a boot for longer than anyone would like to be, but so we'll remember Mindy for certain. And Alicia Stigler continues at Encompass Rehab. Alicia had a fall and is recovering from that. So we want to remember those and many others. Also a new addition, Mike Doolin has a torn meniscus and will be having surgery in the coming days as well. So let's remember those folks. And we have some Christian sympathies as well, some losses in our fellowship. Maggie Shelton in the loss of her brother, I.D. Shelton in New Orleans, Jerry Bragdon in the death of her brother, George Pearson in Florida. And of course, we lost George Griffith this past week. George, the husband of Aline Griffith and father of Sharon Hartzog. So we want to remember the Hartzog and Griffith family in these days. There will be an online service, a memorial service of remembrance for George tomorrow at 11 a.m. And HBC members will get a link to that. So if you'd like to join us on that live service, you can do so tomorrow on that. Please do keep giving us updates. We'd love to hear of the things going on in our fellowship, the joys that you're encountering these days, as well as the challenges. Let's pause for a prayer together. Lord, we continue to take comfort in your presence and know that we're surrounded by your love. In these days when we may not be seeing each other as often as we like, we are comforted even more so knowing that you are where we cannot be. So we pray especially for these who are facing surgeries or recoveries, those who are grieving loved ones in this time, that they would know your love and they would feel also recognize that their brothers and sisters in Christ are thinking and caring for them. We look forward for what you're doing among us these days and the future. We continue to pray for blessings on our fellowship and that you would equip us to do your work in whatever ways the future holds for us. In you we rest and give you thanks. In Christ we pray. Amen. Gary?
One of the hazards of these masks and wearing glasses that gets hung up on them, doesn't it? Good evening. Glad to be here, and I want to begin a series tonight called The Story of Hope. And our chair of deacons suggested this idea to me. I said, Mindy, what do you think folks need to hear about right now? And she said, anything about hope. And I think that's probably right. Of course, I don't know when it's a bad time to talk about hope, but so I got this idea of the story of hope, and I thought, I really could go all the way through the Bible, and I will not threaten you with that. But I thought, skip through the Bible and let's hit some of the stories that sort of take us from hope to hope to hope. And I'm going to start tonight at Genesis with just a mention of the story of Joseph. And then we'll go to Moses' 3 mountains next week and talk about the Psalms, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. Then we'll move to the New Testament and Jesus, and there'll be about 4 on the New Testament. The New Testament is just so rich with hope, but it is a dominant theme from one end to the other, but it's a very mysterious thing when you really think about it, because there's been a lot written in recent years in the pastoral care area about how big a role hope plays in people persevering through problems and making it in things, and the cultivation of hope and how important it is. I want to read to you from Joseph's story as told through the eyes of the book of Acts, chapter 7. This is when Stephen, and they were about to stone him, and he goes through the whole history of Israel, which now that I think about it that way, it was kind of like, I'm going to stretch this thing out just as long as I can. But as he's telling the story, he comes to the patriarchs and says, the patriarchs, jealous of Joseph, sold him into Egypt, but God was with him and rescued him from all his afflictions and enabled him to win favor and to show wisdom when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who appointed him ruler over Egypt and over all his household. Now there came a famine throughout Egypt and Canaan, and great suffering, and our ancestors could find no food. But when Jacob heard that there was grain in Egypt, he sent our ancestors there on their first visit. On the second visit, Joseph made himself known to his brothers, and Joseph's family became known to Pharaoh. Then Joseph sent and invited his father Jacob and all his relatives to come to him, 75 in all. So Jacob went down to Egypt. He himself died there as well as our ancestors. And their bodies were brought back to Shechem and laid in the tomb that Abram had bought for a sum of silver from the sons of Hamor and Shechem. And Hebrews 11:22 has a memory of this too. It says, by faith Joseph at the end of his life made mention of the exodus of the Israelites and gave instructions about his burial. That's a strange thing, of all the things about Joseph to remember. But the story of the patriarchs is one that traces in a narrative way the redeeming purposes of God. And I think it starts out really kind of answering a question that a child would have asked a father down through the ages, and it was, well, you've told me about us leaving Egypt. How did we get down there in the first place? And so it begins to explain how they migrated and how Joseph wound up here in this great sense of the providence of God. And I want to put on the board 3 things here, and I'll put them on there and then explain it. You won't be able to read my writing, but that's okay. And one of the interesting things about the Old Testament narratives is that you have sort of 3 levels going on simultaneously. And down on the ground level, you've just got this story of this obnoxious, bratty kid with a nice coat. His daddy favors him, which immediately makes the other kids hate him. It's a familiar story. We should all know it by now. But he then, and what happens to him? He gets thrown into a pit, then sold into slavery, and then he winds up in this guy's household as his number 1 servant, and is falsely accused of rape, and then he's put in prison, and while he's in prison, he goes through all these travails. And there's very little theological statement in that whole long narrative at the end of Genesis, except for this one statement, and the Lord was with Joseph. Now, if I had been Joseph on a personal level, having to go through such long spaces without hearing from God, I might have said, be with me a little less. So, I wish you'd be with me a little less. But the fact is, the reader is let in on the truth that this is the story of how Israel got to Egypt, ended up in slavery because there would come a Pharaoh who didn't know Joseph. And we know that there was a change. There were some external invaders who came in. And Joseph was in favor for a while, and then there came a change of regimes and all the stuff that always happens with that. They're out of favor, they wind up enslaved. And this explains why Moses had to come lead them out, and the nation was created. But then on the Christian perspective, in the much larger thing too, it is about the salvation of the human race. So these three things are all there. And one of the things that I always say to people, you know, sometimes in counseling, I'll bring up the story of Joseph when they're going through really difficult things and just say, you know, one of the things that tells us is there are multiple layers about what your life means, and you're not privy to most of them. And so you may think your life doesn't mean anything, and in fact it does. And you will only probably know much, much later what it did in fact mean. And so there is this tracing of all of this. It gave them their identity and said to them that God is moving in the stories of things that happen to us. And in fact, I think a lot of us probably ought to consider the truth of that you know, not long ago I was looking back through my computer, just sort of I've been doing a lot of rummaging back through newsletter columns I wrote and sermons I preached way back when, trying to remember what was going on in the church then. And I've just been humbled by how many things I was all excited about then were not as relevant to what eventually came to be than I thought at the time, which says to me both a humbling thing but also a relief that what God is doing doesn't depend on every little thing that I do and think about. And that should be encouraging to you. It's a kind of relief to not have to know everything. Just go about your life and trust that God is at work in it. And so the call is going on and the journey is happening, and all this with Abraham and his journeying to a new place, and Isaac and Jacob and Esau and Joseph. All of this is part of God's overstory of creating the nation of Israel. And it's a powerful thing. It also reminds us not to be too much at home with the way we get things arranged, because there's something else afoot that we don't know about. So we remember all these things that Joseph goes through, and this is a great beginning of hope that says hope sort of stretches out way past what we can see. And that's one thing that I think the Bible talks about all the way through, is that it's important for us, and I think about this moment that we're in. And how hard, when you said October 7th, I just remembered today's my brother's birthday, and I've got to call him on the way home, because I'm not even sure what month it is half the time, because the day goes into day, goes into day. But that's not the way the Lord sees our days. And that's not the meaning of everything. There are things transpiring now that we won't know for weeks and months and years. They're way beyond us. And the great thing is that Joseph, when the brothers show up again, he's got a perfect chance to take out revenge down here on story level 1. But something has happened. He's begun to see his life in a different way. The things he has passed through says the Lord really was with him, because he was changing in character by the things that he was passing through. And, you know, I think it's a very powerful thing for us to remember. And so I think in this story, there are three things that I wanted to just share very briefly tonight that maybe will help you in this time to stay fastened to hope. And I have been sort of experimenting with myself, where I'll go on social media a little while and then back away from it and see how I'm feeling, and I realize how much I get stirred into things. As soon as I turn it off and go read a book or play a guitar or something, it's gone. And so I think, well, you know, that's not real. That's just all stirred up by people. And so there's an opportunity to always, no matter what the circumstances to tune into the deeper thing and trying to see what's going on in the other levels of my life. What is the bigger picture going on here? What might God be doing with all of us right now that we might consider and be open to? And there are three words that I'd give us about the spiritual life in any time. And the first one is progress. That the spiritual life moves. It goes from place to place. And so it literally goes from Israel to Egypt and back to Israel again. But in another way, too, that the spiritual life is always moving from the place where we planted down and said, okay, this is where I'm going to stay. And then you get shaken up and you got to move. And it's just always that way. So progress. Life is not automatic. I don't know if you remember the name Bill Vukovich. There was a Vukovich Senior and Junior that were Indy racers a long time ago, back in the 50s. This was before your time, Brother Mike. Bill Vukovich was the winner of the Indy 500 1953 and 1954. And he was asked, what are the secrets to being a successful Indy driver? And he said, there's no secret. You just press the accelerator to the floor and keep turning left. And, well, if it were really that easy, anybody could do it. And the truth is, there are a million things that could go wrong. And in fact, Bill Vukovich was killed in 1955 in that race. There aren't any left turn strategies for life. There's no automatic pilot that any of us can count on. Progress comes with effort and labor and learning and moving. And so progress is not quick, instant, anything like that. It means character growth, it means spiritual growth. And Joseph had to face not just one thing, but many things. And so one of the things that might be of use to you now is to begin to ask, where are growing edges for me right now? Where am I being challenged in my spiritual life? Am I sitting at home and I have all these opportunities to pray and I'm avoiding it because I just can't sit still, or is there something important for me to get involved in? All kinds of things. Even when things are depressing and difficult, he keeps making choices that toughen him and make him more discerning of the things that God wants from him. So we're never without choices, and we're never without a possibility of progress. And the progress, or the choice that leads to progress, is either to just give up on life or to press ahead and see what the possibilities are. Which leads to my second word of growth, which is wisdom. You also have to know the difference. You also have to begin to learn. There were temptations for Joseph along the way to cave in, to give in to the temptation of Potiphar's wife and all that sort of thing, to despair. He had to make lots of choices, and he had to have the wisdom to know the right ones, to interpret dreams and all of that sort of thing. And to somewhere along the way begin to learn the thing that the narrator is telling us, and the Lord was with Joseph. Joseph must have concluded somewhere along the way, the Lord is with me too. The Lord is here in this. I've not died yet, and I should have many times. And somehow by the time the brothers show up, he's a different guy. And so as you look at that, the things that are happening to you, the things that are going on in your life, it's not that God wants terrible things to happen in the world, but God is at work bringing the good from everything going on anyway, in any way possible. And so we see that wonderful thing. And I think this may have been the way he told the story later to his kids, grandkids, and the rest of the clan. He said, I tell you, when all that was going on, I thought it was awful at the time, but you know what? God was in it. I can see now, looking back. And so as we hack our ways through discouragement and boredom, or overwhelming things, don't miss the opportunities to persevere, to grow in character, and to practice wisdom. Which brings me to my third word, which is maturity. Maturity is a loaded word, but I had a counselor friend describe it this way to me one time. He said, maturity is to accept oneself and one's origins as non-negotiable. Let me say that again. Maturity is to accept oneself and one's origins as non-negotiable. Think about how much misery is created by people trying to go back and remake the life that they came from, and how useless that is. That the place where you begin to grow and move on is when you say, that's what my life was. I had very little choice, or if I did, I made bad ones, whatever happened back there. But that's done. And I have choices about what I'm going to do with where I now find myself. And that is the place where people begin to mature and to grow to different places. I think that was a powerful thing. I've thought about that all these years. That was about 35 years ago that I heard that, and I've never quit thinking about it. And that explains this, to some degree, this peculiar reference in Hebrews. It's so strange that of all the things the writer of Hebrews can remember about Joseph, he just remembered that he got himself buried in a field back up home, not in Egypt. And so, in a sense, he foresaw that Joseph knew ahead of time that my story is not going to end down here in Egypt. This is not all there is to what I've done. My life means more than where it's stopping right now. And even as we come to the end of our lives, to recognize that we have set in motion things that are going to go on and on. And we're going to leave legacies. We're going to leave love. We're going to leave memories. We're going to leave relationships that are going to live on in ways that we don't foresee. And that's good to know, because there are not always instant solutions. Carl Jung, the psychiatrist, once said, all the greatest and most important problems of life cannot be solved. They can only be outgrown. And I don't think that's true of everything. Of course, when it comes to coronavirus, it's probably solved. I mean, that's something for people in laboratories to figure out. But the problems of human beings getting past their own anger, or getting past their own arrested development, or getting past their own challenges in life, that is something that has to be grown past, and that is something that only comes with great effort and pushing our muscles up against the challenges of life. Simply put, God is at work in us and in you, and that brings me back to hope. Because as Israel would tell this story, it was always to remind one another that God is in our big story. And whatever happens to you in this moment is part of that. And I think that people who believe that carry a kind of hopeful DNA in life. That I believe in a God who is at work in my life. And because of that, no matter how bad today was, and believe me, as life moves on, you need to go on to bed a lot more often and try again tomorrow than, it's just, I have learned to say, well, I didn't get it done today, but it'll be there tomorrow. And if I don't wake up, it'll be fine, somebody else can do it. I hope you have hope. And I hope that you realize that this is the story that we share too, is that story of Joseph. It was kept for us, all of us, to believe that life is not meaningless, even when it looks like it may be. Let's bow together in prayer. Lord, fill us with your hope. Thank you for the stories and encouragement that comes to us in the scriptures, and we pray for our congregation. There are 1,000 ways people are struggling for hope. Some with grief, some at the end of life, some struggling against pain, some who are wrestling with terrible questions, some bad circumstances or economic difficulties, but whatever they are, in every place, may they find the hope that says, even if I do not sense God at this moment, I trust and know God is with me. Let that be our truth in Jesus' name. Amen. Good to be with you, and I think we're going to go offline now. And so I'm going to go over there and put my mask on.